We've had a lot of questions recently on training theory. Should we wait for signs our horse is relaxing? Should we give horses time off? What should we check? What schedule or plan should we use? So this week's podcast is all about structuring our training. Hello, welcome to Mark Langley's Horsemanship Podcast, a podcast helping people to understand their horses better, to provide solutions in a calm, connected way. I'm Jenny Langley.
And I'm Mark Langley.
There are lots of questions that have come through from our members. The first question on this topic, Mark, is from Natalie from Australia. She'd like to know how to create a training schedule, and in particular, this is in relation to green or young horses. She knows that each horse is different each day that you go in to work them, but she's struggling to actually string a whole load of training together. And she's just not sure if you work out a plan, and if you do, how you do that. She wasn't sure whether you sit down with a piece of pen and paper and start with leading and then move on to backup or move on to transitions. And she's just not quite sure how to work through different video topics that are also on your online membership, which is there to help anyone with any stage of their horse training. So it's not to do with finding the time or the motivation. It's more about just knowing what to do and when. She knows that some breakers have a bit of a schedule, and the owners can sometimes get the right schedule plan by themselves, but she's wondering what your thoughts might be on the whole kind of question about this. And she says, thanks very much for all your help and your inspiration and the sanity and motivation that she gets from listening to the podcasts.
Working out a bit of a plan, to work with your horses, whether it be a young green horse or a horse that you've sort of, you're just working and you want to know where to go with. Like on the online subscription side of things, everything's structured in a order of leading skills, young horse starting. So in the young horse starting, there's obviously a bit of a plan because you're working through every single day as a new day, but you're working on what you did the last day. So in the young horse starting, anyone who wants to get a bit of a gauge on things to look for, there's some good videos in there. And also I tend to look at what my horse needs, or, what are the red flags. And then on the subscription, might go, my horse is shut down. So, because you might have a plan for a horse that's shut down, but that plan's not going to work. Because you have to maybe open it up and there's a certain area you have to work on. So, but just in general, if your horse is going okay and you're kind of looking at, some form of plan, what I tend to do is, because everything leads into the next thing, like one of my first things would be like, how does my horse understand me? I'm going to do lessons that, might just be testing how frightened it is on one eye or the other eye and things like that, and, approaching it from different sides and stuff. And then it gives me a guideline of, if there's any areas in there that I haven't worked on, that I haven't done, that the horse is nervous. But the biggest thing in the sense of teaching horses stuff, the leading lessons are like the ones that you start with. Because in those leading lessons, you're going to find lessons that you'll find areas where there's holes, like when the horse leads past you. So, like the leading pass lessons, the backwards and forwards and leading up a bit faster, and then into guiding them out, so you can guide them around you and have them soft. And then into the body control in the leading lessons. And you just go through those things like that. And then when you get into your riding, it's much the same. When I step on my horse, is it quiet? Does it follow the reins? So when I step up, is it moving away all the time? And you work on something like that. And then when you're up on your horse, so like each day, you might go through some of your leading lessons before you ride. And if you're doing a lot of riding and your horse is a bit stiff and braced, then in that plan, you'll say, I might do some long reining in that plan to work out some body control, get some brace out of the horse, get it comfortable. If it's uncomfortable with things around it, you work on some, loosening up in the ropes and the long reins. And then you work on when you're riding. If you look at the way I train, everything's one thing at a time. So, so if I've got a horse, and I'm using my legs and I'm also teaching at reins. Well, I might do, start off the lesson with some one rein starts, get it supple in the reins. If it's following the reins, okay. And you might just work on the 3 basic reins, the backup reins, the left rein and right rein, and maybe the indirect rein, left rein and right rein for the hindquarter. And then once they're established, you work on just, some other rein positions. So, and in that, you're going to be incorporating the acceleration and how's my horse move off the legs. Is it comfortable? Is it bright and energetic when it moves off without being frightened? Is it really comfortable, and does it understand those legs? Does it understand those reins? That's before you start putting leg and rein together. So by the time you've gone through all the basic things like that, you'll find that there'll be days that you'll spend a week working on, just getting the horse to steer, and then moving on from there. And then, once those basic things are established, then you're looking at, okay, I might take my horse out. It's frightened out. It might take a long time of just riding out and back. And while you're doing all that riding, you're going over all the rein positions, all the things that you're teaching your horse in the arena. So, but I wouldn't sort of say I have a plan in the sense of, tomorrow I'm going to do this and tomorrow I'm going to do that. It's more so, what does the horse know and what's the next thing it needs to know? And that's the way you look at it. And you just kind of put an order of, okay, is it frightened? Can it lead? Is it okay with people above it? That's in all the starting process. But in the riding process, you're going through everything every day, left rein, right rein, back up. How well does it do this? And really, there's only so many simple things that a horse needs to know before you go to advancement. And all it is just going over those simple things until the horse is at a stage that you can start to put legs and reins together and put it into a bit more of a, some more difficult things.
It's not an easy question for you to answer, is it? Because you don't really have a training plan, do you, Marcus? And what's the reason behind that?
Oh, maybe my personality. That's probably the main reason. And I guess I probably should have a plan, but I guess if you wanted to structure things, instead of a plan, you could have like little bubbles. Okay, and you can look at the leading bubble, and the leading bubble has a whole bunch of little things in it that a horse should understand. And then you might have the trust bubble, and that's all the things that the horse kind of, whether it trusts certain things. So, when I jog up to my horse, is it frightened? When I step up above my horse, is it frightened? It's only frightened on the left side, but not the right side. So that's the trust. So you'd put all these little things in that and just tick them off. And sometimes you don't have to tick them off in any particular order. There are some orders that there is structure. So there is some structure, and that is your horse has to lead well enough before you do all the handling down the back end, because if you're going to have a rope on its head, it's got to be able to trust that and follow that when you start to kind of do more handling above it and different things like that. So that at least got to understand that the halter is a safe and understandable tool on it before you do too much handling. So you wouldn't put lots of handling before lots of leading. So in the sense there's not a plan, but there is an order of events. And once the horse can steer well at a walk, then I'm going to be more safer to work on more leg transitions and go up to trot and canter and teach it to move up through the legs. But I want at least the 3, as I said before, rein positions established, that the horse is comfortable with those rein positions, trust me on it before I'm going to squeeze it up into a canter. And if I can't sort of slap my cheek and make a noise and do something on the horse without it getting frightened, well, I'm not going to work on leg transitions in the canter, because once it gets cantering, it's going to, up the ante. So you've got to be a bit sort of, you've got to be a bit careful when you work on those little areas, that there is a bit of an order in there. But yeah, it's not like necessarily a training plan. It's just look at all the things your horse needs to know in trust things and reins and legs, and then, write a little list of each one of those little things that you think you can find that your horse needs to know, and then just gently go through them and tick them off. And then you'll find you'll be able to create your own little program based on your own horse. Because I think people have to think about the best program for their horse, not a particular training plan.
All right, so let's just say you've got a horse that you haven't ridden for a few days. Do you have a pre-flight check with exercises that you might recommend doing on the ground, just to check your horse is okay before you start riding?
Yeah. So pre-flight checks, I think it's a common word now. I think originally, I think it might have been there was a pre-flight check in the Pirelli system, but I tell you what's a good way of explaining or sort of saying, I want to get on my horse a pre-flight check, just like a pilot goes through and makes sure everything works on that plane before they go up in the air. And that's the thing. I think pre-flight check's a good way of saying it, because if you're up in the sky in an aeroplane, you want to know everything works. And I think that's the same. There's the same level of sort of danger in a horse, in the sense that once you're up on your horse, you're committed. And if something goes wrong, or you haven't kind of addressed something, then it's liable that you're going to be in a maybe life-threatening situation if the horse really sort of, gets a fright. So, and there's nothing more dangerous than something failing when you're way up in the sky in an airplane. So basically, a pre-flight check to me is one of the biggest things I think in a pre-flight check when I'm working any horse. Is I look at the amount of freezer if it's shut down. That's the most important thing. But if it's a horse you already know, and I guess the question's more based on a horse that somebody already knows, you're going to go, okay, how are you when I walk up to you? I always do energy checks on horses. I might walk up to them fast, maybe kind of jog around, pick up something, walk over the horse, walk at it from different angles, and just see how tight and sensitive it is with my approach and my energy. Because there are some horses that I know, and I know I can ride, and they get nervous. But either way, when they've had time off, and it's maybe a horse I don't know very well, but I know it can be ridden, I still don't like getting on horses that are frightened of me and frightened of my energy. Because if they do get a run up or get a spook up, then that could come out as something going wrong. So usually it's about, can I walk around and walk up to them, walk up, touch them, walk away, walk in at different angles. And that's one thing that I just want to know the horse can cope with and understand. And then I want it to move around me at different angles. So can it pass me with that eye and then with the other eye? And can it pass me close? Can I trot it up in the lead? Can it trot past me? Can I bang the saddle? Can I rub it all over as it trots past me? When I put a girth on it, is it tight? Is it loose? In the sense, not the girth, but the horse. Are they tight? Are they loose? Go through some belly roping if the horse is tight. Do a bit of belly rope leading with it to make sure you get all that tension. Because some horses, they are cold-backed and they're sensitive around the barrel, and they might have had 6 months off. And though they were riding with the saddle on 6 months ago, maybe that time off, they've gone a bit more sensitive again around the barrel. So you might want to, if you see them tighten up or freeze, when you put a belly rope around them or handle them all in those sensitive areas, then you've got to work on that, get the tension out. So do some belly roping on both eyes. If it was a horse that previously had a really nervous one side, you make sure you go to both sides of that horse and really double check that you've just got everything, sorted out on those eyes. Maybe I might get up on a rail and just all the things that you do with a young horse. Can I walk the horse past me on the rail and I'm up high and I'm banging and I'm, waving things around? Is it spooky? Is it jumpy? Has it trotted with the saddle? Has it cantered with the saddle? If they had a big lot of time off, you kind of want to know that they've carried the saddle at a trot and a canter, and they've run a bit in it. If you've had a bit of trouble trying to get the horse into a canter or things then sometimes you can set up a little cavaletti or a little jump in the yard, and the horse jumps it, and as they jump, their rib cage expands, and that can sometimes set them up for a bit of a hoppy that you didn't want to ride. So you can do that, and then basically it's getting in close, getting them to walk around me while I'm stepping up, pulling on the saddle, things like that. And in all this process, you're actually leading them, leading them in a turn around you, seeing if they're following the inside rein around you, so you can do some ground driving, hold the saddle, walk them around you on both eyes so they're doing nice turns in the reins in whatever you're using, a bit or a side pull or a halter. And then can I step up in the stirrup and they stay kind of mobile? So sometimes what I do is I have them ground driving and then I put my foot in the stirrup and step up while they're still in a bit of movement and see if they really freeze or not. People might see in some of the videos when I'm getting young horses asking them to move. So that's really important, getting them to move. And then by that time, if you've sort of been above them, you've sort of maybe put the flag up in the air, shook it a bit above them, done all that, they've moved, they've walked, trotted and cantered. The next thing is get on and hopefully you don't have to sort of, worry too much. But the biggest thing in a pre-flight check is the horse open, breathing all the way properly? Ears mobile, eyes mobile. Is it loose? Are the muscles loose? And can it walk loosely, or is it tight and extra? So the pre-flight check isn't, my horse can stand really still. Look at that. It must be it must be okay to be ridden, because that could be that frozen horse that's going to explode. So if I see good mobility, normal blinking, good breathing, ears moving around, a general healthy engagement, then I know the horse is telling me the whole story of its anxiety as it's going. It's not hiding anything in freeze or being shut down. And usually, if the horse is good and soft as you're stepping up above them and things like that, then you know where they're at, because they're expressing it as they go.
You mentioned then about the horse telling you about their anxiety and how important that is. I've got a question here from Kaz, who has noticed that when you're teaching a horse to lead, I think this is in one of the videos that she's been watching, and it's one of your young horses, that you didn't wait for a chew after each little learning experience when you were working. She's wondering, is it because it was a young horse? The context behind this question is that her mare is 15 and takes a long time to chew or breathe after any pressure, even when she's just left to stand with the rope on the ground. And so she's sort of waiting for her to be happy and relaxed, but she's wondering, is she overthinking it by waiting for this relaxation after every learning experience? She's been trying to gain her confidence.
Yeah, that's really...
She does have a lot of mini spooks, and she has these sort of minor interruptions in her environment. So she's just not quite sure whether she should be waiting or whether she should be actually getting her horse used to bigger sort of interruptions, or whether that would be flooding, or whether because she's older and maybe she's had a difficult past that this is actually acceptable. Have you got some kind of sort of response to that scenario?
Yeah, there was an old sort of thing around horses for years before even I think people started teaching the idea of horsemanship or anything, but it was always that wait till they have a lick and chew, and maybe a lick and chew, maybe that meant they learnt something and that sort of thing. And so it's common, and it's out there in the horse about the licking and chewing, but the context of training a young horse versus your older mare is it is a different context, and a young horse will carry moments of tension and release, but a young horse that hasn't had a lot done to it is usually, unless they're in a yard and they're a wild horse, is kind of in a full state of freeze because of the amount of pressure from just being in that environment. So those horses obviously are going to have bigger licks and chews because they're in a they're in a state of freeze because there's a person over there, and there's a high amount of tension. So they'll when you walk away, they'll probably have a lick and a chew and an eye pop and all that sort of thing. But when you come back in, they'll be sort of all kind of shallow breathing, semi-frozen, hyper-focused, stuff like that. So in those wilder horses, you're working them until you see signs of softness, and then while you're standing there, hopefully they'll lick and chew and maybe let go of some of that tension when you're around them, not when you open the gate and walk out. So the idea is you don't necessarily have to wait for lick and chew every time you do something with a young horse. You're just looking for general signs of softness and if the horse is licking and chewing quite commonly after a so many second pause or minute pause, then basically the work is creating enough tension that's not releasing, and it's not softening and opening up its airways and loosening its jaw whilst it's in a state of education. So I try and just work a horse until I feel and see general signs of softness. And what I start to see is they start to, if they were carrying certain amounts of tension that causes more of a noticeable lick and chew, then I want to start to see that whilst I'm guiding them, not release and wait for a lick and chew. So basically a horse will lick and chew while you're working it, and that's the thing that you really want to be happening, because it's actually releasing while there's pressure, whereas a lot of horses have tension in pressure and then release that tension when the pressure goes away. And obviously in horse training, one of those sayings it's that everyone says, and it's not just a saying, it's actually it's a true saying in the sense that horses learn from the release of pressure. But the problem I have with that saying is everyone just thinks that, you release and that's a reward for the horse. And you see a lot of horses lick and chew in release, but they never lick and chew when you're guiding them. So if that makes sense for just training horses in general and young horses, I'm just going to go on to your 15-year-old horse. 15. Anyway.
15.
Sorry.
Yes.
15. So basically, your horse is relaxing or letting go of the tension once the education stopped. So I'm concerned that your horse licks and chews every time you stop and wait some time. The reason I'm concerned is because your horse is operating in the wrong mindset and in a state of freeze. So horses in a soft mindset don't yawn much. They don't suddenly have rapid eye movement after letting go of tension, because they're constantly in a nice state of healthy breathing, healthy, no tension in the jaw. Their eyes and ears are working properly. Their airways are working properly. So they're not having these kind of noticeable quiet faces and then noticeable licking and chewing faces. They're more of a sort of a everything's happening naturally all the time sort of face. So you don't see these changes in their face and their expressions and their licking and chewing. So your mare is in a state of I'd say freeze and tension when you're guiding her, and when you go away she licks and chews. So that's concerning, because you have to fix it, because you need to work her till she lets go of tension under pressure. It's like a state of paranoia, and some horses that are like that, it's almost like they anticipate what's going to happen, because you don't know you may not know her whole history, but some horses are almost like waiting for the job interview all the time. So when you start doing something, they're always in a certain state of tension, but they never quite come out of it. So some of those horses, I actually bring them up a little bit higher in their anxiety, give them something to think about, and then I keep guiding them until they start to relax whilst I'm guiding them and come down from that state of anxiety. Because the state of paranoia is like anticipation something's going to go bad or something's going wrong. And those horses have often been in the worst situation or a situation above that, but they're just always anticipating it. So they're always worried when you're doing even mild education with them or sort of mild pressure with them. So sometimes I actually bring them up and then I guide them out of that slightly higher state into a softer state, and they come right through that anxious state into a starting to loosen up and open up their mindset whilst I'm guiding them. And then you see the relaxation within pressure, opposed to the pressure stopped, release, relax. And also the way we apply pressure, the horses that I've seen that have been driven all the time, flooded till they sort of have a certain amount of learned helplessness, all that sort of thing, they all suffer from looking very still and, kind of statue-like when they work, and then relaxing when the pressure goes away, or coming down when the pressure goes away. I wouldn't say they fully relax. They usually fully relax when we're out of sight. But so those horses have been worked in a state of I got to move away from pressure. I got to look for pressure. They've never been worked in a way where they're going towards their thoughts. So they're not processing, thinking, and that's why they have those lots of licks and chews or yawns or lots of things after work or when release is there.
The next question is from Lisa in New Zealand, and she would like to hear your thoughts on resting horses. So we've been talking about working, but this is giving them a break, particularly when they've had a breakthrough with learning something. She's got a 7-year-old stock horse who was very shut down. He's had a lot of ridden work over the winter on a farm and has opened up a lot. So right now he's in a really good frame of mind. He's going really well. Is it good to give him some regular time off? And if so, how long? She's worried that he might go backwards if she reduces the amount of work that he gets. He seems to have a huge engine and needs work to keep him level.
Okay, the last bit of that there, work to keep them level. Yeah, there are some energetic horses and some horses that are generally, if you see an alert horse in a paddock, that's kind of the one that tends to spook a bit more than the others and worry about little things in the paddock and don't have a lot of confidence, you kind of know those horses after a spell are going to naturally be a bit more spooky when you go out. And sometimes you just got to be careful on those first rides after a big spell, because they don't process new environments in the world so well. So they're the ones you might notice that they're nervous when you have a spell. But in the sense of a horse, say, getting tired under saddle, wanting to buck, wanting to be scared of you and all that sort of stuff after a spell, they're usually the horses that were educated in a state of freeze, shut down like he was, or something like that. So when they've had 12 months off, they're the horses that come in and bronc, and you got to work them for a week before you can take them out, and then you got to put put lots of wet saddle blankets on them, all that sort of thing. For people who don't know what that means not put wet saddle blankets on them. They create wet saddle blankets through sweating and work. So those horses, those station horses that got bucked out to be broken in, all those horses don't go well after a time off. And generally you kind of feel like you're half breaking them back in again when they come into work again. But if your horse and if you're a good judge of his character and you do really feel that he's not shut down anymore and he's getting a healthy state of awareness and he's connected with you and he's not frightened of the things that you're doing underneath him and he's generally awake in a healthy way, then that means he's starting to trust and feel okay in education, and he's getting a good memory from that. So basically, if he's getting a good memory from education and everything's going fine, there is no reason why after 6 months off it wouldn't take you more than sort of half an hour just to kind of remind him a few things, and then you're back seemingly where you left off. So I found with the horses that I've started that are in a good mindset and they're feeling good about education, and you leave those horses and you don't really feel like there's this teething process when you bring them back in. There might be a little bit, but not a lot. It's not like it is when they're sort of in a state of fear when they were broken in, and then they're just starting to become sort of in a learned helplessness work state. So basically, it's good to give them, but I guess the other part of the question is it good to give them a break? Of course it is, because like anyone that just if you're working them every day, it's good to have some time off and just do some other things and things like that. But the horses that are, say, worked every day or every second day, and they feel okay about their hour or two work every day, they don't need a break as much as someone that's in an office that they're really stressed in. Okay, but obviously the person who's stressed in the office relaxes, becomes a better person on holidays because all that tension kind of goes away for a while, but they're very stressed when they have to go back to the office again after the holiday. So a horse that's worked in stress needs a break because you'll cook it or you'll shut it down more or whatever. But when they come in after the break, doesn't mean they're going to be happy. A horse that's worked in a state of softness doesn't need as many breaks because they're kind of feeling good when they're working. I'm not saying don't give them breaks. A break will still be good for them, giving them time just out, whatever, that sort of thing. But you don't have to sort of, I don't think there's a big, like, you got to give them 4 months off because they're going to go sour. The sour horses are the ones that are in tension. So, but yeah, so if you think he's soft, he'll come back in soft, even if you gave him more time because you were busy doing something else. But the last part of the question that I'm a bit concerned about, that he's got a big tank. When a horse is soft, they don't have tons of energy to burn. They're not, wanting to, they don't have that big tank. So it tells me that maybe he's not shut down, but he still could be carrying a certain amount of anxiety. Just feel like you've got to work him all the time to work that energy out of him. I think an over-energetic horse, when you see a horse out in the paddock, they'll all stand under a tree for hours. They'll all walk around quietly like nothing's going, but then when you ride him, you see over-energy. I'd say there's still anxiety in there. So I'd be sort of, looking at that and going, okay, well, how can I get him not so anxious without thinking I've got to keep him in work all the time, not so energetic without keeping him in work all the time. So there's probably something a little red flag in there with the extra energy that he has that I'd trying to identify.
It's those little extra bits of information that you give out, Mark, that is so interesting to hear. It just makes us realise the depth of your knowledge. So I hope that you talking about training in this session and sort of how it can be structured in some loose way has been helpful to all of you out there listening. Thank you very much for your time, Mark. Thanks for listening to all the listeners. We'll be back next week.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, everybody.
If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like it, share it, or leave us a comment. It all helps in reaching new ears and helping more horses. Learn more of Mark Langley's unique insights and how you can positively affect your horse's training ability and mental welfare. For just the price of a couple of coffees, you can access his online horsemanship training videos. Head to marklangley.com.au.